Overlord Volume 6 Chapter 6 Chapter 6 Prelude to the Royal Capital's Disturbance Part 1 Lower Fire Month, 9th month, 3rd day, 1744. The door to the guest room slowly opened. Its hinges were regularly oiled and it should have swung open smoothly. But for some reason, the motion of the door seemed unusually sluggish and ponderous, as though the door was fighting a pressure differential between the air on the inside and the outside of the room. It was as though their speed was matching the way Sebas felt. If the door had truly read his heart, then Sebas would have much rather it had not opened at all. However, it did open, revealing the interior of the guest room to Sebas' eyes. The room was the same as always, but unlike how it usually was, there were now 4 heteromorphic beings waiting inside. One was a light blue warrior. He emitted a freezing aura and held a platinum halberd, but was otherwise motionless. One was a demon. There was no telling what schemes hid within his mocking features. Then, there was an angel in the shape of a fetus, held in the arms of the demon. And finally, "Please forgive my lateness. I am deeply sorry to keep you waiting." By sheer force of will, Sebas quashed the trembling in his voice. Then he bowed respectfully to the sole-seated being in the room, as though in worship. Sebas was the butler and the head of the manservants, and he occupied a position close to the top of Nazarik's hierarchy. Only one person could make Sebas bow before him in fear and awe. There could be no other. That entity was one of the 41 supreme beings, who commanded fealty that could not be contested. Ain-Zu-El-Gaon. This almighty fighting force was also the ruler of the great underground tomb of Nazarik. The staff of Ain-Zu-El-Gaon emanated a black aura from its place within his hand. Dim red pinpoints of light played lazily within the hollow orbits of his eye sockets. Even from his bowed position, Sebas could sense those lights sizing him up from head to toe. The movements of the air told him that Ains had waved expansively, in a leisurely manner. "It is fine. Think nothing of it, Sebas. The fault lies with me, being that I did not communicate my arrival in a timely manner. But let us dispense with these pleasantries. How can you speak from over there with your head bowed? I bid you enter." "Yes." Sebas's head was still lowered as he responded to the solemn voice. He looked up, and then slowly stepped forward while a trail of frost ran down his spine. That was because his keen senses told him of carefully concealed hostility and killing intent. He slowly shifted his gaze. The 2 guardians before him did not seem to be paying much attention to Sebas. However, that was from a normal person's point of view. Sebas was abundantly aware of it. There was no trace of friendliness in the tense atmosphere. The opposite was true, in fact. Their vigilance was not the reaction one would have to an ally. Sebas could understand why they felt that way. He felt a weighty pressure upon him, and he was afraid that everyone would hear the thunderous beating of his heart. "I think you should stop there." Demiurge's relaxed voice rang through the air and halted Sebas in his tracks. Sebas was some distance away from his master. It did not make speaking difficult, and when one considered the dimensions of the room and the fact that he was meeting with a superior, it was quite an appropriate distance. However, under normal circumstances, Ains would consider Sebas to be too far away and ask him to approach. This time, Ains had not said so. This sense of separation crushed Sebas until he could no longer breathe. At the same time, this distance was the ideal range for Cocytus the warrior to launch an attack. That too was another source of strain for him. Incidentally, Solution had entered the room with Sebas, but she was standing by the door, awaiting orders. Then, Ains snapped his bony fingers, though how he had done so was not apparent. "A question for you, Sebas. Need I explain why I am here?" There could only be one reason for that. The current situation made that very clear. "No, there is no need for that." "Then, I have a question which I would like you to answer in your own words, Sebas. While I did not receive a report from you concerning this matter, is it true that you picked up an adorable little pet recently?" It was as he thought. Seba's back felt like it had been impaled by several ickles. Then, he realized that he had not answered his master's question. He hurriedly replied, "Yes." A little slow on the reply, Sebas. "Let me ask you again, is it true that you picked up an adorable pet recently and decided to take care of it?" "Yes, I did take in a pet." "Very good. Then, could you explain why you did not report the matter to me?" "Yes." Seba's shoulders shuddered and he stared at the ground. What could he say to avoid the situation developing in the worst possible way? Ains leaned back into his throne as he watched the silent Sebas. The creaking of the chair as he did so sounded exceptionally loud in the confines of the room. "What's the matter, Sebas? You seem to be sweating heavily. Shall I lend you a handkerchief?" With a grand flourish, Ains produced a pure white handkerchief from nowhere. He grasped it between his index and middle fingers and tossed it towards Sebas. The handkerchief unfolded and spread in midair, landing gently upon the ground. "You're permitted to use it." "Yes. Thank you, my master." Sebas took a step towards Ains and picked up the handkerchief. Then, he froze. "That handkerchief is not stained with your pet's blood. I simply felt that it was unsightly to have you covered in sweat." "Yes. Please forgive my shameful display, Ains-sama." Sebas spread the handkerchief and wiped at the cold sweat which beaded his brow. The handkerchief absorbed such an incredible quantity of moisture that its color changed. "Then, let us return to the topic, Sebas. When I sent you to the royal capital, I believe I ordered you to record any occurrence, great or small, in exacting detail and send it to Nazarick. After all, it is difficult for one person to determine the value of information collected. Frankly speaking, I doubt you omitted a single detail when submitting your reports. Am I correct?" "Yes. It is as you say." "Then, Demiurge, allow me to address a question to you as confirmation. After all, you have read Seba's reports as well. Did those reports mention this adorable little pet?" "No, Ains-sama. I read them several times, but I saw nothing related to that subject." "Very good. Then, let us use that point as a premise for my next question, Sebas. Why did you not submit a report on that matter?" "I wish to ask why you disregarded an order from me. Is the word of Ainzu-Elgaon not enough to bind your actions?" Those words shook the air in the room. Sebas hurriedly answered, "Certainly not. I simply believed that there was no need to trouble you with a report concerning such a small matter, Ains-sama." Silence filled the air. Sebas was bathed in murderous intent from 4 sources. They came from Cocytus, Demiurge, the angel which Demiurge held, and Solution. All 4 of them would immediately fall on Sebas if their master so ordered. Sebas did not fear death. It would be his utmost joy to die for Nazarick. Yet, the thought of being executed as a traitor terrified even the stoic Sebas. That was because there was no greater shame for those created by the 41 supreme beings than to be counted as a turncoat and subsequently eliminated. After some time, and after much sweat had beaded on Sebas' forehead, Ains spoke. "In other words, all this was an exercise of your foolish judgment. Is that correct?" "Yes. It is as you say, Ains-sama. Please forgive my foolish mistake." I see. I believe I understand now." As Sebas lowered his head in apology, Ains's emotionless voice filtered into his ears. The fact that Ains had not ordered a summary execution slightly eased the tension in the room. However, Sebas could not relax. Before he could do so, Ains said something that made Sebas' heart lurch within his chest. "Solution. Fetch Sebas' pet." "Understood." The door quietly closed behind Solution as she moved to carry out her orders. Sebas' keen senses informed him that Solution was heading away from the door. There was an audible gurgle as Sebas gulped. Ains, Cocytus, Demiurge and that strange angel were here, for a total of 4 heteromorphic beings. While Demiurge looked vaguely human, the same could not be said of the other 3. Since none of them seemed to be taking care to hide their forms, did that mean they did not care if someone else saw them? The denizens of Nazarick had only one method to keep secrets from spreading: by killing everyone who knew them. If he had known this would happen, he would have let her go earlier. Sebas mentally shook his head. It was too late to think of that now. Soon, Sebas sensed two people approaching. They were approaching this room from the distance. What should I do? Sebas' eyes shifted and he focused on the air. Once she arrived here, Sebas would have to make a choice. And there could only be one answer he could give. Sebas' gaze moved to Demiurge, who was observing him, then to Ains, and then he looked powerlessly at the ground. There was knocking, and then the door opened. As expected, there were two women there. They were Solution and Su'er. I have brought her. Sebas had his back to Su'er, but he could hear her gasp from the entrance. Was she shocked to see Demiurge, a demon in the flesh? Was she shaken by seeing Cocytus, the gigantic blue insectoid? Was she frightened by the sight of that fearsome fetus-like angel? Was she terrified by Ains, the avatar of death itself? Or was it all of the above? The Guardian's displeasure intensified as Su'er made her appearance. That was because to some extent, Su'er was the physical incarnation of Sebas' sins. It would seem she was trembling from the hostility directed at her. The hostility of the Guardians, who were easily the most powerful beings in this world, could instill a primal terror in the hearts of the weak. It was surprising that Su'er had not broken down in tears by now. Sebas did not look back, but he could clearly feel Su'er's gaze boring into him from behind. Her reservoirs of courage were derived from Sebas himself. Demiurge, Cocytus, restrain yourselves. Learn from victim's good example. As Ains's quiet voice echoed through the room, there was a change in the room's mood. No, it would be better to say that the hostility directed at Su'er had vanished. After reprimanding the two Guardians, Ains slowly extended his left hand to Su'er. Then he turned his palm to the ceiling, and beckoned her over. Enter, O pet human that Sebas has picked up Su'er. As though controlled by those words, Su'er took step after step forward on trembling legs. That you did not choose to flee shows courage. Or did Solution tell you something? Did she say that Sebas' fate lay within your hands? Su'er was shuddering all over and did not answer. Sebas felt the gaze directed at his back grow stronger. Said gaze made Su'er's will abundantly clear, more than any number of words could explain. After entering the room, Su'er walked up to Sebas' side with no hesitation whatsoever. Cocytus shifted position to stand behind Su'er, awaiting orders. Su'er grabbed the corner of Sebas' coat. Sebas suddenly recalled how she had clung to his clothing in that alley. At the same time, he was filled with regret. If he had handled things better, the situation would not have come to this. Demiurge glared coldly at Su'er. Knee, and the sound of snapping fingers rang forth. Demiurge understood the meaning behind his master's gesture, and said no more. It is fine. Pay it no heed, Demiurge. As praise for the courage to face me without fleeing, I will forgive the rudeness she has shown to myself, the ruler of Nazarick. My sincerest apologies. Ains nodded magnanimously at Demiurge's apology. Ah, yes. Ains leaned back into the chair, making it creak. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Ainzu Elgaun, the master of Sebas over there. Indeed, Ainzu Elgaun, one of the 41 supreme beings, was the great entity who controlled every aspect of Sebas' existence, including his life and death. Being addressed by the master to whom he owed absolute loyalty was his greatest delight. Yet, for some reason, Sebas' joy was less than he had imagined. It merely made his spine tingle. It was not because of Su'er, because upon being addressed by his master, Sebas had almost forgotten she had existed. There was another reason for that. As Sebas was pondering this matter, both sides were still conversing. I am. It is fine, Su'er. I know a little about you, and I have no interest in learning more. Stand there and remain silent. Soon you'll know why you have been summoned. Yes. Now then. The points of red light in Ains's eye sockets shifted. Sebes, I have a question for you. I told you not to attract attention with your actions, did I not? Yes. And despite my clear instructions to you, you got yourself into trouble because of this meaningless little woman, am I wrong? No, you are not. The word meaningless made Suor shudder, but Sebes only answered the question and made no other response. At that time, did you not think you were ignoring the orders I had given? Yes. My thoughtlessness has displeased you, Ains Sama. I shall reflect upon my sins, be more careful in the future, and I shall not make the same mistake again. It is fine. Huh? I said, it is fine. Ains shifted, and the chair creaked once more. People are not perfect, and mistakes are to be expected. Sebes, I shall forgive this trifling mistake of yours. Thank you, Ains Sama. However, mistakes must be rectified by death. The air in the room suddenly grew tense, and the temperature felt as though it had fallen by several degrees. No, that was not it. Only Sebes felt that way. The others, the denizens of Nazarick, remained serene and still. Sebes gulped. What did his master mean by death? No, that went without saying. The thoughts, as I expected, and I hope not, weighed heavily on Sebes, but still, he asked, what do you mean? What I mean is that I expect you to eliminate the source of your mistake in order to wipe the slate clean. How can you be the representative of everyone else when you leave the origin of your error untouched? You are the butler of Nazarick, and one who stands at the head of the manservants. If you do not handle the matter appropriately, Sebes exhaled. Then he took in another breath. Even when faced with a mighty foe, Sebes' breathing remained calm and regular. Yet, it was now frantic, like a small animal that had run into a predator. Sebes, are you a loyal hound who obeys the orders of my exalted self of the 41 supreme beings? Or are you a man who believes that your will alone is righteous? This. I do not need your answer. Show me your conclusion. Sebes closed his eyes, and then opened them again. He hesitated for only a moment. No, it would be better to say that he had spent an entire moment hesitating. This time he had spent in indecision was enough to earn the palpable ire of Cocytus, Demiurge in solution, people whose loyalty to the Supreme One was beyond reproach. After that long, interminable moment, Sebes finally made his decision. Sebes was the butler of Nazarick. He was nothing else beyond that. His foolish hesitation had brought about these consequences. If he had pleaded with his master earlier, the outcome might have been different. All this was his fault. A hard luster filled Sebes' eyes. They gleamed like polished steel. Then, he turned to Suor. The hand clinging to him let go. Its fingers clutched briefly at empty air, wavering for a moment before falling powerlessly. Suor looked at Sebes' face. She had probably guessed his decision by now. She smiled, and closed her eyes. That was not a look of despair, or fear. She had accepted what would happen next, had accepted her impending fate with all the grace of a martyr. Sebes' movements did not waver. His heart had long since descended into the abyss. In his place stood a steely servant who had pledged his utmost fealty to Nazarick. That being the case, there was no reason not to obey the absolute order handed down by his master. He had cut through his confusion. Only loyalty remained. Sebes' hand formed into a fist, and then he struck at Suor's head, seeking to grant her the mercy of an instant death. And then, something hard intercepted his fist. What are you doing? Why are you interfering with me? Something had blocked the fist which should have obliterated Suor's skull. Cocytus had reached out a hand from behind Suor, whose eyes were still tightly shut, and stopped Sebes' fist. Was Cocytus a traitor, given that he had blocked a strike which the Supreme One had ordered? And then, the doubts in Sebes' heart were immediately answered. Stand down, Sebes. Sebes was anxious and doubtful, but he was still halfway through another punch when he heard Ains's order. The strength he had channeled into his hand dissipated in an instant. His master had not censured Cocytus but had instead told Sebes to stop. That indicated that he had also arranged for Cocytus' interdiction of Sebes' strike. Indeed, all this had been planned ahead of time. The fact was that his master wished to verify Sebes' intentions. Sur timidly opened her eyes, and saw that the headman's axe which awaited her was long gone. Now that her life was no longer in danger, her wound-up emotions snapped inside her. Sur's body convulsed with shudders as the tears streamed from her eyes. She very nearly collapsed from the shaking of her legs, but Sebes did not reach out to support her. No, he could not. What else could he do, now that things had come to this? What right did he have given that he had left her to her fate? Ains paid no heed to Sur's fear and began addressing Cocytus. Cocytus, was that blow intended to take that woman's life? There is no doubt that it would have been instantly fatal. Then I declare that Sebes' loyalty is no longer in question. Thank you, Sebes. I would not dare. Sebes bowed, his face stiff. Demiurge, any objections? I have none. Cocytus, none. Victim, Deri Faruo, I have none. Very well. Then, let us move on to the next item. Ain snapped his fingers and rose to his feet. He swept his hand grandly through the air, causing his cape to flutter. Thanks to the efforts of Sebes and the others, I feel we have gathered sufficient information. There is no reason to linger in this place. We shall vacate this property immediately and return to Nazareth. Sebes, I will leave the disposal of this woman to you. Since I have already verified your loyalty, I'll not object to whatever you wish to do, or at least, I would like to say that, but some considerations must be made before releasing her. Allowing her to go free and speak of Nazareth would be troublesome. Do you not agree, Demiurge? It is as you say. While there are still unknown enemies at large, we would be best served by not allowing information about ourselves to spread. Then, what should we do? Should we not make sure of things first? Indeed, Sebes, we will decide Sur's fate later. I would prefer not to kill her, but I cannot guarantee that. Please keep that in mind. Sebes was hard-pressed to hide his surprise that Ains, the highest authority in all Nazareth, could not instantly resolve the matter of Sur's disposal. Ains Sama, are we retreating from this house, from the royal capital, because of my mistake? Perhaps. Perhaps not. Like I said just now, I feel we have learned everything we can from this area. There would be no gain in continuing to stay here. This is a safer course of action, according to my calculations. Demiurge, I will bring Victim back. Give him to me. After taking the fetal angel Victim from Demiurge, Ains cast a spell. Greater teleportation. Ains flourished his cape in a theatrical fashion as he cast the spell, as though he were an actor. Then he was engulfed by a sphere of blackness which then vanished inward, taking his body with it. For a moment, Sebes stared dumbly at that overacted exit, which he had never seen before, but then he suddenly came to his senses. That's right, she looks a little tired. I would like to take her back to her room to rest. I trust there will be no problems if I take her there, Demiurge. Indeed, you have the right of it, Sebes. A thin, fiendish smile appeared on Demiurge's face, and he gracefully gestured to the door, as though to say, please, carry on. However, it is possible that Ains Sama might summon you once more, given the circumstances. I hope you will be ready for that. While I feel that there is no need to worry about that, I do not wish to go on a fox hunt in the royal capital. Please come with me. Yes, Sur replied hoarsely as she followed shakily behind Sebes. After leaving the room, the hallway echoed with their footsteps. The two of them walked in silence, and soon they reached the door to Sur's room. It was nearby, but the journey there seemed to have taken a very long time. When they reached the door, Sebes finally made up his mind and quietly said, I will not apologize. Sebes sensed Sur tremble from where she was following behind him. However, the fact that my master ordered me to dispose of you was my fault. If I had dealt with the matter in a better way, it would not have come to this. Sebas-sama, I am a loyal servant of Ain-sama of the 41 Supreme Beings. Even if the same thing happens again, I will respond in the same way. So I hope you will stay in the human world and find happiness there. I will try to seek Ain-sama's approval. Given that Ain-sama can modify memories, let Ain-sama erase your unpleasant memories and then live well. How about my memories of you, Sebas-sama? I will ask Ain-sama to erase your memories of me as well. After all, remembering me will do you no good. And what is good for me? Sebas sensed a fierce determination in Suer's voice, and turned around. The woman before Sebas stared defiantly at him, and although her eyes were brimming with tears, they had an unshakable look in them. Sebas felt his heart waver, and he thought about how to persuade her. It was true that Nazarick was a wonderful place, and one could say it was a land blessed by the gods. But the only ones who thought that way were Sebas and the other people who had been created by the 41 Supreme Beings, as well as the vassals of the great underground tomb of Nazarick. Sebas did not think that human beings, who lacked talent and power, could find happiness in that land. Neither did he think that Domain would welcome low-value life forms like humans. Indeed, she would not be able to live there without the protection of his Supreme Master. Therefore, Sebas told her, I want you to find happiness in the human world. I have already found happiness. It is by your side, Sebas-sama. So please, take me with you. Sebas felt that Suer was quite pitiable as he heard her ironclad statement. You seem to have found happiness in a small thing, but it was merely the living hell before that which numbed your soul. She had seen the worst the world could offer, so she had taken joy in even a slightly less wretched environment. That was all. However, Suer laughed at his observation. I do not feel that this place is hell. I can eat my fill here and I have a decent job. I grew up in a small village, and life was hard there. For a moment, Suer glanced into the distance. Then she recovered, and looked straight at Sebas. Our stomachs cried out in hunger, and no matter how hard we worked the fields, our Lord took almost everything and left us with precious little to eat. In addition, we were nothing more than toys to our Lord. No matter how much I cried and screamed, he kept laughing as he raped me. He laughed at me. I understand. Suer's smile was twitching as Sebas pulled her over, enfolding her within his embrace before gently putting an arm over her trembling shoulders. Just like before, Sebas could feel Suer's tears soak his clothes as she broke down. What she had seen and lived through was not all of the world. Yet, to Suer, that was the sum total of the human experience. Sebas fell into thought. What should he do? No matter how he thought about it, there was only one answer. But that answer would anger his master. It might even make him order Suer's death. You might die. If I must die by the hand of Sebas-sama, but the hand of the one who showed me kindness when I should have died in that place. Suer looked up to him. The look on her face helped Sebas make up his mind as well. I understand, Suer. I will plead with Ain-sama to let me take you to Nazarick. Thank you. It is too early to thank me. If I plead for you, Ain-sama may order me to kill you. I am already prepared for that. Is that so? Sebas let the strength fade from the arm on his shoulder, but Suer refused to leave. She clung tightly to Sebas' clothes, looking up to him with dewy eyes. There seemed to be a look of expectation in those eyes. That was what Sebas' instincts told him, but he did not know what she was hoping for. Still, he remembered that he had to confirm one thing first. Allow me to make sure this. You have no attachment to the human world? Do you not wish to return to your home? Even being taken to Nazarick did not entail being completely separated from human society. That was because he was not taking Suer there to be prisoner. However, that possibility could not be entirely ruled out. I would like to see my little sister again. But more than that, I don't want to remember all the things in the past. I understand. Then, go to your room. I will go and meet Ain-sama once more. Yes. Suor let go of Seba's clothes, and then she wrapped her arms around Seba's neck. Suor paid no attention to the outwardly expressionless, yet inwardly conflicted Sebas and stood on the tips of her toes. And then, Suor's lips met those of Sebas. The moment of intimacy was exceedingly brief. Suor's lips soon left his. It was a little prickly. Suor said as she stepped back, touching her lips with the fingers of both hands. It was the first time I was so happy to be kissed. Sebas had nothing to say. However, Suor looked intently at Sebas, and then smiled sweetly. Then, I shall wait here. Thank you for your concern, Sebas-sama. Oh, I understand. Please wait here for a while. Is something the matter? It would appear your face is red. No. That was the first thing Sebas heard when he returned to the room. Upon hearing someone comment on the redness of his face, Sebas calmed his breathing back to a deep and even rhythm. If he allowed his consternation from just now to show on his face, what right would he have to receive his master as his servant? Sebas resisted the impulse to touch his lips, instead putting on the expression of the perfect servant. It is nothing, Demiurge-sama. There is no need to address me in such a formal manner, Sebas. Just as you did in front of Ain-sama, in front of our master of incomparable worth, you may address me by my name alone. How about you, Cocytus? Do not mind. After hearing from the two guardians, Sebas indicated that he understood. About 5 minutes later, space distorted. By the time the distortion had faded, someone stood in its place. Naturally, that person was Ains. The staff of Ain's gown he had been carrying just now was nowhere to be seen, and neither was victim. Sebas, Cocytus, Demiurge in solution knelt as one and bowed to him. Thank you for the warm welcome. Ains circled behind the desk and took a seat. You may rise. The four of them straightened up at once, all looking at Ains. He seemed to be in a very good mood. Let's get down to business. Demiurge, this just goes to show you are worrying too much. I didn't believe for a moment that Sebas had betrayed us. You are all too cautious. Besides, I verified it myself in the throne room. My deepest apologies, and I am grateful that you would accept my pointless suggestion, which contradicted your own judgment. That's fine. I also make mistakes from time to time. However, I can relax when I know you are paying attention and checking, Demiurge. Besides, you made that suggestion because you were worried about me. I am not so petty as to censure you for that. Ains shifted his gaze from Demiurge, who was bowing deeply, and towards another direction. Now then, Sebas, it is time to discuss how to deal with that human girl. Sebas' body went stiff from nervousness. He forced out a yes, and then after inspecting Ains's countenance, he made up his mind and asked, how shall we deal with Suor? The silence continued, and then Ains spoke, in what sounded like a suggestion. I recall that letting that girl go would result in news about Nazarick getting out, am I correct? Demiurge nodded under Ains's gaze. Indeed, that is so. Ain-sama, how shall we handle this matter? We shall alter her memories. Then, give her some money, and dump her somewhere. Ain-sama, I feel that killing her outright would be more convenient. There would also be fewer things to worry about. Solution nodded at Demiurge's suggestion. After seeing their reactions, Ains sank into contemplation. Since the two of them felt the same way, he should probably do it. Perhaps. Sebas began to panic. Once his master made a decision, asking him to change it would not be easy. While Ains had forgiven Sebas, Demiurge, Cocytus and Solution would surely think very poorly of him now. Carelessly voicing his opposition would definitely incur their ire. However, he had to make his proposal right now. Sebas opened his mouth, preparing to speak in opposition to Demiurge's opinion. However, he ended up not doing so, because Ains spoke first. That's enough, Demiurge. I am not fond of killing when it doesn't benefit me. Or rather, once you kill the weak, you cannot use them any longer. You must consider that they might still be of use as long as they still live. Sebas swallowed a sigh of relief. Sewer had not yet been condemned to death. That said, it was still a possibility. I understand. Then how about having her work at the ranch managed by my subordinates? Oh, I recall you were breeding chimera. That's right. Have you considered mincing them and using them as rations? We need to improve the quality of Nazarik's provisions. Demiurge's eyes left Ains, who was muttering about chimera steaks then. No, hamburgers might be better. And looked into the distance. Then he turned back. Unfortunately, the quality of their meat is poor, and they are not up to standard. Using them in glorious Nazarik would be a little. Demiurge smiled, indicating that he did not approve. Still, we can chop up the dead beasts and feed them to the others. Of course they will not eat the meat if you feed it to them directly, so we have to mince it up first. Oh, so they will eat their own kind? Animals are ultimately animals, after all. You are correct, Ain-sama. Still, that is what makes them foolish, cute and suitable as toys. The thing is that they are omnivorous, so they will also eat grains and the like. Therefore, may I trouble you to grant me some grain if there is any left over? Given the current situation, our plundered supplies are somewhat insufficient. They are the source of parchment, a critical resource. I do not wish to let them starve either. How about this? Sebas, purchase large quantities of grain before we leave and direct them to Demiurge. Understood. Given the quantities required, I wish to rent a small warehouse and store the grains there. How shall we transport the grain to Nazarik? About that. Bring Shiltir over and have her use gate to send it over. Demiurge will take over from there. Will that be alright? Yes. We will handle the transportation from there. Very well. Yes. Demiurge, you are arguably the hardest worker in Nazarik, and I am very grateful to you for that. Thank you very much for your kind words, Ain-sama. They serve as immeasurable encouragement to your humble servant. Calm down. Therefore, I had something to ask you. Are you not suffering greatly under your many labors? I call you back whenever there are problems, and you must manage the breeding ranch to maintain the supply of parchment, and then there are the preparations for creating the Demon King. I fear you are displeased with the many weighty tasks you have been given. Demiurge was all smiles. Sebas had never seen that expression on him before. It was a smile that lacked any malice whatsoever and endeared him to all who looked upon it. I am deeply grateful that you would be so concerned for your humble servant. However, please be at ease. All these tasks are meaningful and they do not constitute a burden to me thus far. If I feel there is the need for it, I shall surely request assistance. At that time, I shall have to trouble you for succor and aid. I see. Sebas frowned mentally as he heard his master's voice of delight and thought about the truth of the conditions at Demiurge's ranch. Sebas and Demiurge were both servants of the Supreme Beings, and Sebas knew Demiurge's personality well. Someone like Demiurge would never run an ordinary ranch. The same would apply even if he were raising creatures like chimera. A brilliant flash of light raced through Sebas' mind. This was because he had guessed what sort of creatures Demiurge was raising. Could he send Sewer to such a place? Indeed, Demiurge would probably guarantee the safety of her life. However, the same could not be said of her mental state. Just then, there was a lull in the conversation between Ains and Demiurge. This was the only time for Sebas to cut in. After deciding on that, Sebas addressed his master. Ain-sama. What is it, Sebas? If I may. He held his breath. This was a gamble, an extremely risky gamble. Yet, it was one he had to make. I would like to have Sewer work for us in the great underground tomb of Nazarik. Silence descended upon the room, and all eyes converged on a single point in the room. Ains calmly asked Sebas. I asked Cocytus the same question before. But Sebas, what merits are there in doing so? To begin with, Sewer can cook. In all of Nazarick, only the head chef and the sous chef can prepare food, excepting Yuri and the others. After considering the future needs of Nazarick, I feel that it would be better if we had more people who could cook. I also feel that it would be very beneficial to test the ability of humans to work in Nazarick. It would set an excellent precedent to show that even inferior life forms like humans can render service unto Nazarick. In addition, I get it. I understand, Sebas. Ains raised his hand to interrupt Sebas' non-stop rambling about the many uses of sewer. I know, Sebas. I am fully aware of what you're trying to say. Indeed, I have thought in the past that we have too few people who are able to cook. It is a problem worth pondering. But Ains-sama, can she really prepare food which is worthy of Nazarick? Sebas glared resentfully at Demiurge for a moment. In response, Demiurge merely smiled. You bastard! Sebas swallowed the curse before he could speak it. Even if Ains had forgiven Sebas, Demiurge had not. Therefore, he was striving to be as contrary as possible to Sebas' wishes while they decided the disposition of Sewer. That must be it. He does have a point. What do you think, Sebas? Sewer mainly prepares basic dishes. As for whether they are suitable for Nazarick, that is a little difficult to answer. Basic dishes. I doubt Nazarick will require steamed potatoes or the like. I am compelled to point out the shallowness of Demiurge's thinking. Since she can already make basic dishes, that implies she can learn other cooking techniques from the head chef if she but asks. We cannot simply look at the present, but must consider the future. Then I would love to have her help prepare food in my ranch. Making mincemeat is hardly a trivial task. The two of them bickered back and forth. Ains watched their conversation. At the same time, he looked beyond them. He saw the phantom images of their creators, ghosts of a glorious golden past. So, where are we going today? The fire giants. The ice dragons. Albert-san, I believe we agreed to farm the fire giant boss Surtur for his rare drops. Did you forget? I'd like to ask if you forgot, Touch-san. There are people who need to hunt ice dragons in order to meet their job change prerequisites, aren't there? Indeed, that is so. But Yamaiko-san needs the drops to get stronger. I'm okay with. Are you referring to the primordial fire? Then the primordial ice is just as essential. No. That being the case, we should hunt the dragons. We can raise drop rates with a cash item. Surtur has a lower drop rate than the dragons, so don't you think we ought to beat him first? So you're telling me to shell out for a cash item, then? Well, about that. How about fighting lewd monsters like succubi in the abyss? Shut up, little bro. Well, if we're going after demon types, we ought to fight the 7 Lords of Sin. Granted, we might need to make a lot of preparations. Touch-san, I don't think you should be so selfish. Don't you think we'd be more efficient fighting the ice dragons, given the members who showed up? You're the selfish one, Albert-san. Besides, games aren't all about efficiency. With the strongest mage and the strongest warrior, please stop fighting. They've always been like that. Ever since they recruited me. Touch-san must have been a really great guy to chat up a pink penis. Shigama-san, Ferrucino-san, could you please put your weapons down? I'm invoking my guildmaster's privileges. Didn't some other guild beat the 7 Lords of Sin already? Someone took out Pride. There was a post online. Apparently, you're guaranteed a world-class item once you beat all the 7 sins. After all, they are world-class enemies. Speaking of world-class items, let's use the caloric stone to make a super powerful golem. Nubu-san, I feel it would be better to socket it into a weapon instead of making a golem. I think a suit of armor would be pretty good too. We do have to think about that. After all, it's an item that allows us to make requests to the devs, so we'd be better served by thinking carefully about it. That's right, Manga-san. We already know how to farm caloric stones, but that method depletes a lot of the metal from the hidden prismatic ore mine. Ah, we can't get it unless we have sole control over the mine. What a pain. Yeah, as long as it's divided up among other guilds, we can't replace it once it's used up. Why not just take turns using it? How about selling the information to Trinity? That ought to make people greedy and trigger infighting among them, and we can swoop in to pick up the pieces. So we sell it to the Alliance and let them kill each other? That's our strategist Punido Mosam for you. Speaking of the Alliance, they seem to be reaching out to others. Why's that? Question mark. I heard they obtained some kind of world-class item, so they changed their stance towards other guilds. Ikia, still, it'll be hard for them to form a high-tier coalition like last time. How about letting Manga-san decide? Sounds good to me. Guildmaster, what do you think we should do? What? I wasn't paying attention at all. Oh, are you asking me now? Honestly, we'll go with majority vote as usual. That way nobody will have any complaints. Fine with me. Same here. Alright then, the new coin will represent Albert-san while the old one represents Touch-san. Good everyone, take your coins. We're going to listen to the two of them speak now. Are you quite done with this squabbling? You stand before Ain-sama. Kokaida's words were like a bucket of cold water dumped onto the ever-escalating quarrel between Sebes and Demiurge. Both of them turned to look at Ains, who was staring at them, and their faces blanched in unison. There was no way to tell what expression lurked within the dancing points of light within Ains's empty eye sockets, but there was no doubt that there was great power in his gaze. The two of them sensed their master was about to castigate them at any time, and they both responded simultaneously. Forgive your servant's rudeness in your presence, Ain-sama. Your servant deeply regrets forcing you to witness his foolish behavior. The two of them bowed in apology, but neither of them could understand Ains's reaction. Aha! The room suddenly rang with loud and relaxed laughter. They did not recall Ains ever laughing with such mirth. Kokaidas, Demiurge, Sebes and Solution stared dumbly at this unbelievable sight. It's fine. I permit this. I permit you to argue. Yes. That's how it should be, going back and forth without end. They had no idea what had moved Ains's heart, but Sebes quietly sighed in relief, sensing that the situation seemed to have changed. The override kicked in. Suddenly their master's mood calmed down, as though something had snapped inside him. Still, Sebes was sure that he seemed to be in good spirits. Ains then addressed Sebes in a relaxed tone. I already know what Sebes wants to say. Unfortunately, it is not a good idea to bring humans into the great underground tomb of Nazareth. That said, I wish to see that sewer girl. Bring her to me. Yes. Your servant understands. Sebes was puzzled by Ains's strange pronouncement, but he immediately left the room and fetched Suer. Ains-sama, I have brought her here. Bring her over. Ains leaned forward from his chair. He stared at Suer in a very strange way. Had something about her displeased the master? Sebes glanced at Suer from the corner of his eye, but he had no idea why his master would act like that. Look similar, he murmured. He had probably not meant to say that out loud. Welcome, Suer. Let me begin by making things clear. I do not warn people twice because I wish to respect the choices that others make. That applies even if said choice results in disaster for the other party. With that out of the way, I wish to ask you something. If you lie, the matter will be over. The same applies if I do not receive the answer I wish to hear. Sebes could hear Suer swallow from where he was standing by the side. He did not fault her for that. She was probably feeling very uneasy about her impending fate after that threatening display. Then, my question is, tell me your full name. Sebes did not understand the meaning of that question. Why had he asked it? He glanced at her again, and saw that Suer's eyes were roving all around the room. Her attitude explained everything. Please answer honestly, Sebes prayed. The fact that she had not even told Sebas her real name suggested that it might be very problematic. That said, lying to his master would probably be the worst-case scenario for her. The silence continued, and after a nerve-wracking period of time had passed, Suor finally responded in a voice as faint as a mosquito's buzzing. Suor. Suorindania. And your surname? Suorindania Veyron. I see. Then, I shall ask you this, Suorindania. Your wish is to travel to the great underground tomb of Nazarick, that is to say, my domain, and live there, am I correct? The great underground tomb of Nazarick is not a world where humans can live. No, I do not mean that humans cannot survive there, but that it does not contain members of the race known as humanity. Therefore, I do not know if it is a suitable place for you to live. You may also choose to accept the fortune I will give you, and live the rest of your days in a distant human domain. His terms were so generous that it made people question why Ains was going this far for her. However, Suor did not hesitate and replied immediately. I wish to live with Sebas-sama. Ains nodded slowly. The crimson light in his empty eye sockets seemed strangely gentle. Good. Listen well, my servants. Everyone immediately snapped to attention. Suor hurriedly made to imitate them. I guarantee the safety of Suorindania in the name of Ainzualgaon. I can treat you as a guest of the great underground tomb of Nazarick, but what would you prefer? Thank you, my lord. But I would prefer to work with Sebas-sama. If that is what you wish, then, for the time being, Suor shall be a temporary maid who is directly subordinate to Sebas. Sebas give her appropriate work. At the same time, the Pleiades will change from the 6 stars to the 7 sisters, with the appropriate change in the team's leader. However, we will not move her from that place. Yuri Alpha will take charge instead. Solution bowed deeply. Also, tell everyone in the great underground tomb of Nazarick that Suorindania is under the protection of Ainzualgaon. At the same time, she will be working alongside you. Everyone except Suor and Ains bowed as one. Demiurge, do you have any objections to my decision? None at all. Your word is law in the great underground tomb of Nazarick. However, I feel many will not understand why we have welcomed a human being to this blessed land of ours. How shall I explain this to them? When I think about it, Yamaiko-san's sister Akemi-san was a wood elf, but we frequently invited her to Nazarick. There is no ban on the entry of humans or humanoids. Otherwise, Ains looked at Solution, who was waiting for orders within the room, and said, we would have to chase out your little sister as well. However, it remains to be seen if an immortal can still be considered human. Indeed, Solution. Then, Demiurge, tell them that I have decreed this. If anyone feels otherwise, they are free to look for me. I will explain it to them. Your servant understands. I have no further questions. Then let us confirm our course of action. First, we will immediately vacate this property. All the sentries stationed here will return to Nazarick. Solution and Sebas will complete their final task in the royal capital, which is to purchase grain for Demiurge, and then they will transport it to the storehouse. Once sufficient quantities have been accumulated, we will have Sheltir use gate to transport the grain. Am I correct? Everyone bowed in silence. Suor looked around and hurriedly bowed as well. Then, there's Suor. How should we handle Suor? Will she go back with us? Or should she go back with Sebas? Your servant submits that going back with me would save a lot of trouble. Is that so, Sebas? I understand. Then, Sebas, Solution, bring the sentry vassals here. I will take them all back with my magic. Understood. After watching the 3 of them leave, Demiurge asked Ains, may I ask if you are familiar with that girl? Ains did not answer that question, but slowly rose from his seat. Then he turned to face a blank wall. The way he did so was as though there were someone standing there. After a short while had passed, Ains spoke. Demiurge, I am a person who believes in returning good unto good and evil unto evil. At the same time, I feel that debts owed must be repaid. Ains produced a book from thin air. This leather-bound book was bound with string, and it was of rough workmanship. The head librarian has already translated it, but this is the original. It was the diary of a girl who burned with anger because her elder sister was taken away by a nobleman. Once, in a certain village, there lived a pair of sisters who were very close. Their parents had passed away when they were young and they were poor, but they helped each other through life. However, the elder sister was taken away by the lord of the land, a man with a terrible reputation, to serve as his concubine. Perhaps the younger sister might have been able to wish her well with tears in her eyes if her elder sister had been able to live well. However, the rumors her little sister heard made her guess that her elder sister would be used as a toy and then disposed of as garbage once her captors tired of her. When her guess was proven accurate, the furious little sister left her village because nobody was willing to help her. Soon, she discovered that she had a talent for magic, and so she steadily built her strength in order to save her elder sister with her abilities. However, she had met her end before meeting her aim. The diary was mainly filled with brief, simple sentences. On the last page, she had written words of praise for a pair of adventurers who had gone to gather herbs with her, Mon and Abe. I learned some things about how the world worked from this diary. So I am in your debt. Let me pay it to your elder sister instead. Ains stroked the leather cover, which was discolored from age, and then returned it to his pocket dimension. Ains-sama, your servant seeks your permission for a matter. What is it, Demiurge? I saw the reports which Sebas submitted, and something caught my interest. Might I have some of your time? Is there a problem? Yes. There is a place I wish to investigate. I will attempt to return before you must go back, Ains-sama, but it may take a while because I have to search for the place in question. Having you wait for me is terribly disrespectful, but if you could spare me a bit of your precious time. As Ains saw Demiurge's grave face, Ains decided to speak in a light tone to put him at ease. It is fine, Demiurge. You are doing so for the benefit of Nazarick, are you not? Waiting for that purpose is not a hardship. Go, Demiurge. Thank you very much.